The house was so still that night, it felt as though even the air itself had fallen asleep. The kind of silence where every tiny sound, a creak of the floorboards, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, feels magnified, almost alive. I remember lying there beside him, my husband's breathing steady and deep, his chest rising and falling like the rhythm of an ancient tide. It should have been peaceful, but something tugged at the edges of my mind, a whispering unease I couldn't quite name. And then, just as I drifted close to sleep, the door clicked open. Not slammed, not pushed, it clicked. That deliberate sound, soft yet unmistakable, froze me in place. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird trying to escape its cage. At first, I thought it might be the wind or maybe one of those old house quirks we'd grown used to over the years. But no, this wasn't random. This was purposeful. I turned my head slowly, careful not to wake him, and saw him standing there, our son, wide awake, his little face pale under the moonlight streaming through the window. He didn't say anything. Just stood there, staring at us with eyes too big for his small frame, clutching something tightly in his hand. Something wrapped in cloth. My throat tightened as I tried to call out his name, but all that came out was a strangled whisper. His gaze never wavered. And in that moment, I realized two things: he wasn't supposed to be here, and whatever he held in his hands wasn't meant for me to see. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second stretching longer than the last. The room smelled faintly of lavender from the sachet I'd placed in the drawer months ago, a small attempt to mask the lingering scent of stale coffee and unwashed dishes. Outside, the trees swayed gently, their shadows dancing across the walls like silent specters. Everything seemed so ordinary, so mundane, that it almost hurt to think how quickly life could unravel. Daniel's side of the bed remained untouched, just as it had been for days now. His pillow lay flat, the sheets cool and undisturbed. I wondered if he'd even come home tonight or if I'd wake up alone again, clutching the thinning hope that things would somehow get better. But those thoughts faded when I heard it, a soft thud from downstairs, barely audible over the hum of the night. At first, I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe the wind knocked something over, or maybe one of the cats had wandered into the kitchen again. But then came another sound, this time closer, closer than it should have been. A shuffle, followed by the unmistakable creak of our bedroom door easing shut. My stomach twisted into knots as I forced myself to sit up, pulling the blanket tighter around me. The room felt colder now, the air heavy with unspoken questions. Who else could be here? And why did it feel like every nerve ending in my body was screaming at me to run? Yet, I stayed frozen, rooted to the spot, listening intently as footsteps moved softly along the hallway outside. They weren't hurried or panicked, they were deliberate, measured, as though whoever it was knew exactly where they were going. The clock struck 12, its chime echoing faintly through the house. For a moment, I thought it was just the sound that had woken me, but then I saw him, Ethan, standing in the doorway, his small frame silhouetted against the dim light spilling from the hallway. His face was pale, his eyes wide and glassy, reflecting the moonlight filtering through the blinds. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling like the first crack of ice on a frozen lake. "Dad. Dad is in the living room, with another woman." His words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the breath from my lungs. But it wasn't just the shock of what he said, it was the way he looked, the way his shoulders sagged under the weight of something far too heavy for a 12-year-old to carry. He wasn't angry or accusatory, he was heartbroken, as if the world he'd always trusted had suddenly shifted beneath his feet. I forced myself to sit up, shaking off the fog of sleep. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. Had I misheard? Was this some kind of nightmare? But Ethan's gaze held mine, unblinking, anchoring me to the reality of the moment. There was no mistaking the truth in his eyes. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely audible. It wasn't the question I wanted to ask, not yet, but it was the only one I could form. I didn't know until tonight, he replied, his voice cracking. I heard them talking. Laughing. Like they forgot we even existed. A lump formed in my throat, threatening to choke me. I reached out instinctively, pulling him closer, wrapping my arms around his thin frame. He stiffened at first, then slowly relaxed, burying his face in my shoulder. As I held him, memories flooded back, the late nights, the excuses, the distant look in Daniel's eyes. How had I missed it? How had I let this happen? But there was no time for regret now. Not with Ethan looking to me for answers, for strength. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain, nothing would ever be the same again. Each step down the stairs felt like a lifetime, my feet moving on their own while my mind reeled. The house seemed to shrink around me, the walls closing in as if trying to contain the storm brewing within. My breath came in shallow gasps, and every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn back, to shield Ethan from this ugliness. But I couldn't. Not now. When I reached the bottom, the sight before me stopped me dead in my tracks. There they were, Daniel and her, standing near the couch, their body language a tangle of guilt and discomfort. She was someone familiar, though I couldn't place her at first. Maybe a coworker. A friend he'd mentioned once or twice. It didn't matter. What mattered was the way they stood there, so casual, so unaware that their little secret had been exposed. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Then Daniel's eyes met mine, widening in panic. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He glanced nervously at the woman beside him, who shifted awkwardly, clutching her purse as if preparing to flee. Elena, she whispered finally, her voice trembling, not with fear, but with embarrassment. I can explain. Explain what? That you've been lying to me for months. That you brought her into our home, into our sanctuary, where memories of laughter and family dinners still lingered in the air. But I didn't give her, or him, the satisfaction of responding. Instead, I turned slightly, catching Ethan's gaze over my shoulder. He looked small, vulnerable, his arms wrapped tightly around himself as if trying to hold everything together. And in that instant, something inside me snapped, not into anger, not into despair, but into resolve. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about protecting my son, about showing him that even in the face of unimaginable pain, we could find strength. We could survive. You two have some explaining to do, I said, my voice steadied despite the chaos inside me. But not tonight. Tonight, Ethan and I are leaving. You can stay here and figure out whatever mess you've made, but don't expect us to be waiting when you're done. As I took Ethan's hand, leading him toward the door, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the turmoil. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The days that followed were a blur of emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, all swirling together in a storm I couldn't escape. But as the dust began to settle, questions surfaced, demanding answers. How did this happen? Who was she? And most importantly, why did Daniel choose her over us? Her name was Claire, and she wasn't just some random stranger. She worked with Daniel at his office, a graphic designer who had joined the team only 6 months earlier. From what little I knew, she was ambitious, charming, and strikingly beautiful, a stark contrast to the quiet life we led together. They met during one of those endless late-night brainstorming sessions that Daniel often claimed were necessary for deadlines. At first, it was innocent enough, coffee breaks, shared lunches, and casual conversations about work. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. Daniel later admitted, through broken sobs during one of our heated arguments after the incident, that he felt trapped. Trapped by the monotony of our routine, by the weight of responsibility, by the dreams we'd once shared but somehow let slip away. He spoke of feeling unappreciated, unheard, invisible even, things I hadn't noticed because I was too busy juggling everything else. In Claire, he found someone who listened, someone who made him feel alive again. Someone who didn't remind him of the mortgage payments, school schedules, or grocery lists. But knowing why didn't make it hurt any less. If anything, it stung deeper because it painted a picture of a man who had slowly disengaged from the life we built together. It wasn't an impulsive mistake, it was a choice, a series of choices, that chipped away at the foundation of our marriage until there was nothing left to hold on to. As I sat alone in the quiet house, staring at old family photos scattered across the mantelpiece, I realized the ripple effect of betrayal extends far beyond two people. Ethan bore the brunt of it all, witnessing firsthand how adults fail, how promises break, and how love isn't always enough. His eyes, once filled with innocence, now carried shadows of doubt and uncertainty. I thought about the countless times I'd reassured him that families stick together, that love conquers all. Now, those words felt hollow, like echoes of a past I could never return to. Yet, amidst the wreckage, a flicker of determination sparked within me. This wasn't just about picking up the pieces, it was about rebuilding something stronger, something rooted in honesty and resilience. For Ethan's sake, I had to believe that healing was possible, that trust could be restored, and that hope still lingered, even in the darkest moments. The days turned into weeks, and the house that once buzzed with life now felt eerily silent. Ethan began withdrawing into himself, spending hours in his room sketching or staring out the window, lost in thought. I tried to reach him, to bridge the gap widening between us, but he kept me at arm's length, his young heart armored against further pain. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I found a crumpled piece of paper tucked under Ethan's pillow. Unfolding it carefully, I saw a drawing, a stick-figure family standing together, smiling, but with a jagged line cutting through the middle. On one side stood Ethan and me, holding hands, on the other, Daniel and Claire, their figures entwined. Beneath it, in childish scrawl, were the words, "Why did they break apart?" My throat tightened as I realized how deeply this situation had affected him. That night, I sat beside him on his bed and asked him about the drawing. For the first time since the incident, he opened up. "Mom," he said softly, "do you think Dad really loves her more than us?" His question cut deeper than anything Daniel could have done. How do you explain betrayal to a child without shattering what little faith he has left in the world? Instead of answering directly, I told him a story, one I hadn't shared before. "When your father and I first met," I began, my voice steady despite the storm inside me, "we were two people chasing dreams bigger than ourselves. He was passionate, driven, and full of life. And I fell hard for someone who made me believe anything was possible. But over time, we got so caught up in building a life together that we forgot to nurture the love that brought us here." Ethan listened intently, his wide eyes reflecting the flickering light from the bedside lamp. "So, does that mean love can disappear?" "No," I replied firmly, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Love doesn't disappear, it changes. Sometimes, it grows stronger, and sometimes, it weakens. What matters is how we choose to handle those changes. Your dad made a choice that hurt us, but that doesn't define who he is, or who we are. We get to decide our own story moving forward." Meanwhile, Daniel reached out sporadically, sending texts and voicemails filled with apologies and promises. At first, I ignored them, unsure if I could trust his words. But one message caught my attention. "I need to talk to you both. There's something you don't know about Claire, and it might change everything." Curiosity gnawed at me, but I hesitated. Was this another attempt to manipulate, or was there truth behind his claim? After much deliberation, I agreed to meet him, not alone, but with Ethan by my side. If there was anything else to uncover, he deserved to hear it too. We met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, a place neither of us frequented. Daniel looked haggard, his usual confidence replaced by an air of desperation. Across from him sat Ethan, arms crossed, jaw set, while I held his hand tightly beneath the table. "Claire isn't who she says she is," Daniel blurted out after ordering 3 cups of coffee. His voice shook slightly, betraying his unease. "She lied to me, about her job, her past, everything. She used me, Elena. I swear, I didn't realize it until recently." "Used you for what?" I demanded, my patience wearing thin. "For money," he admitted, lowering his gaze. "She knew about our savings, our investments. She planned to leave me once she got what she wanted. I found emails, documents, proof of her schemes. I didn't cheat because I loved her, I cheated because I let myself believe her lies." Ethan's expression shifted from anger to confusion. "Does that mean you still want to be part of our family?" Daniel looked at him, tears forming in his eyes. "More than anything, Ethan. I messed up, royally. But I'm willing to fight for us, for you, for your mom, for whatever chance we have left." For the first time in weeks, I saw genuine regret etched across his face. Yet, rebuilding trust wouldn't happen overnight. It would take effort, transparency, and perhaps most importantly, forgiveness, a gift neither Ethan nor I were ready to give just yet. As we walked home that evening, Ethan broke the silence. "Do you think Dad's telling the truth?" "I don't know," I confessed. "But I do know this, whether he is or isn't, we'll figure it out together. Because we're stronger than this, Ethan. Stronger than any lie, any betrayal, any challenge life throws our way." And as we stepped inside, the weight of uncertainty lingered, but so did the promise of hope. The days that followed Daniel's revelation were a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. His confession about Claire's deceit wasn't just an excuse, it was the beginning of unraveling a web far darker than any of us had imagined. What Daniel uncovered about Claire wasn't just a betrayal, it was a calculated plan. She wasn't just some opportunistic lover, she was a master manipulator who'd been weaving her way into our lives for months, using him as a pawn in her scheme. Claire had entered Daniel's life with charm and purpose, but it soon became clear that her intentions went far beyond a fleeting affair. Through meticulous investigation, Daniel discovered a trail of lies that stretched back to their very first meeting. Claire hadn't been hired by his company through legitimate channels, she had falsified her credentials, fabricating references and exaggerating her experience to secure the position. Her real motive: access to Daniel's connections, wealth, and resources. But the deception didn't stop there. As Daniel dug deeper, he uncovered a series of transactions hidden within their joint accounts. Small amounts at first, then larger sums siphoned off under the guise of work expenses or of personal investments. By the time Daniel realized what was happening, tens of thousands of dollars had vanished from their savings account, funneled into offshore accounts linked to Claire's name. "She knew everything," Daniel admitted one evening, his voice trembling as he showed me printouts of emails and bank statements. "She found out about our investments, our retirement funds, even the college fund we set up for Ethan. Every detail she used against us." It turned out Claire had spent months grooming Daniel, earning his trust while simultaneously dismantling the financial stability they'd worked so hard to build. She convinced him to sign off on loans, claiming they were for business ventures that would benefit both of them. In reality, those loans were never repaid, leaving Daniel liable for debts he hadn't authorized. Daniel's world crumbled around him. Not only had he lost the trust of his family, but he now faced ruinous debt, lawsuits, and public humiliation. Claire had left no stone unturned in her quest to destroy him, and she succeeded. When Daniel confronted Claire, demanding answers, she laughed in his face. "You think this is about love?" she sneered during their final argument. "This was always about money. You made it too easy, Daniel. All I had to do was play the part you wanted me to be." Her words stung, not just because of the truth behind them, but because of how easily she dismissed the pain she'd caused. Claire disappeared shortly after, leaving behind nothing but empty promises and shattered dreams. Attempts to track her down proved futile, her fake identity dissolved as quickly as it had appeared. The consequences of her actions rippled outward, affecting every aspect of Daniel's life. Creditors began calling, threatening foreclosure on the house. Friends and colleagues distanced themselves, whispering behind closed doors about the scandal. Even Ethan, who once idolized his father, struggled to reconcile the man he knew with the version exposed by Claire's schemes. One night, as Daniel sat slumped in his chair, head in his hands, Ethan approached him cautiously. "Dad," he said softly, "did you really think she cared about you?" Daniel looked up, tears streaming down his face. "I wanted to believe she did, son. But I was wrong. So wrong." Ethan hesitated before placing a small hand on Daniel's shoulder. "It's okay to make mistakes, Dad. Just, don't let her win." Together, we began picking up the pieces, not just for Daniel, but for all of us. It wouldn't be easy, and the scars would remain, but we chose to fight back. For Ethan. For each other. And for the future we still believed in. With newfound determination, Daniel vowed to repair the damage done. He sold off assets, took on extra work, and restructured his career entirely. Alongside him, Ethan learned valuable lessons about resilience and accountability. Though the road ahead was long and fraught with challenges, the bond between father and son strengthened through shared struggle. As for me, I watched from the sidelines, offering support where needed but also maintaining boundaries. Trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight, nor could wounds heal instantly. Yet, in moments like these, when Daniel and Ethan worked side by side, I saw glimpses of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light can find its way through. And as the sun rose on another day, casting golden rays through the windows of our modest home, I allowed myself a small smile. Because despite everything, we were still here. Together. Fighting. Surviving. And maybe, just maybe, thriving again. As the dust settled and the immediate chaos gave way to reflection, I found myself drawn to questions that lingered beneath the surface. How could someone I loved so deeply stray so far? Was it purely a matter of poor judgment, or were there deeper forces at play? These questions led me down a path of discovery, not just about Daniel's choices, but about the intricate dynamics that shape relationships. I started reading everything I could find on infidelity, relationship psychology, and emotional connection. Journal entries became my confidant, pages filled with scribbled thoughts and revelations. Through therapy sessions, both individually and as a family, we began to peel back the layers of what had gone wrong, and why. One thing became clear: infidelity is rarely a singular event. It's the culmination of unaddressed issues, simmering beneath the surface until they boil over. For Daniel, it wasn't just about feeling trapped in our routine, it was about years of unspoken frustrations, unmet needs, and a growing sense of invisibility. He'd stopped sharing his struggles with me, bottling them up until they found an outlet in someone else. And Claire, with her charm and manipulation, exploited those vulnerabilities like a predator sensing weakness. But this wasn't just Daniel's story. It was ours, a reflection of how easily communication can falter, how quickly intimacy can fade if left untended. Societal pressures played their part too, the constant push for success, the fear of failure, the expectation to have it all figured out. Those external forces crept into our home, subtly eroding the foundation we thought was unshakable. Understanding these dynamics didn't excuse Daniel's actions, nor did it erase the pain. But it gave me clarity. It helped me see that healing wasn't just about fixing one person, it was about rebuilding the entire system. It meant learning to communicate openly, setting boundaries, and prioritizing emotional connection over everything else. Ethan, too, benefited from this newfound awareness. Through family counseling, he began to process his feelings without guilt or shame. He learned that love isn't fragile, it's resilient, capable of surviving even the deepest wounds when nurtured properly. And as for me, I emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. This experience taught me that no relationship is immune to challenges, but every challenge presents an opportunity for growth. By confronting the root causes of Daniel's betrayal, we weren't just repairing a broken marriage, we were forging something new, something better. Because sometimes, the hardest lessons are the ones that lead to the greatest transformations. Healing wasn't about erasing the past, it was about creating a new future. Slowly, we began rebuilding our bonds, one moment at a time. Daniel learned to listen, truly listen, to both me and Ethan. We set aside our differences, focusing on what mattered most, family. The months that followed were marked by small victories and gradual progress. Daniel, once distant and consumed by guilt, made a conscious effort to be present, not just physically, but emotionally. He started spending evenings with us, engaging in activities that brought us closer together. On weekends, we planted a garden in the backyard, each of us taking turns nurturing the soil and watching life grow from it, a metaphor for our own healing process. Ethan, initially hesitant, began opening up again. During quiet moments, he would ask questions, sometimes about Claire, sometimes about their future. These conversations weren't easy, but they were necessary. They allowed us to address lingering fears and uncertainties while reinforcing the idea that our family could still thrive despite the scars left behind. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table sharing stories and laughter, Ethan surprised us by suggesting a family game night. It was simple, yet profound, a reminder that joy could coexist with pain when given space to flourish. As we laughed over silly mistakes and celebrated small wins, I felt a warmth spread through my chest. This was how we rebuilt, not through grand gestures, but through countless tiny acts of love and connection. Daniel, too, found solace in these moments. He confessed later that seeing Ethan smile again gave him hope, a reason to keep fighting for redemption. Together, we established routines that prioritized communication and emotional intimacy. Weekly check-ins became non-negotiable, where we discussed not only practical matters but also feelings, dreams, and fears. Slowly, trust began to mend, though its edges remained fragile. While we focused on healing, there was still unfinished business. Claire had vanished without a trace, leaving destruction in her wake. But we couldn't let her get away with it, not after everything she'd done. Despite our efforts to move forward, the specter of Claire lingered. Her betrayal wasn't just personal, it was financial, legal, and deeply damaging. The debts she'd saddled Daniel with continued to weigh heavily on us, threatening our stability. Closure demanded accountability, and so, after much deliberation, we decided to track her down. It started with online research. Daniel pored over old emails, social media profiles, and any clue that might lead to her whereabouts. Meanwhile, I reached out to a private investigator recommended by a friend. With their help, we pieced together fragments of Claire's true identity. She wasn't the successful graphic designer she claimed to be. Instead, she had a history of similar schemes across different cities, targeting affluent individuals like Daniel. The investigation revealed patterns. Claire always operated under aliases, moving quickly before anyone could catch on. However, her greed often led to mistakes, leaving trails we could follow. After weeks of relentless searching, we finally located her in a neighboring state, living under a new name and working at another company. Armed with evidence of her crimes, we filed a formal complaint with law enforcement. While prosecution was uncertain due to jurisdictional complexities, the act of confronting her felt empowering. For Daniel, it was closure, a way to reclaim some semblance of control after being manipulated so thoroughly. When the private investigator delivered the final report, we gathered as a family to discuss next steps. Ethan, surprisingly mature for his age, voiced his opinion. "We should tell people," he said firmly. "Other families deserve to know what she's capable of." His words resonated deeply. We decided to share our story publicly, warning others about Claire's tactics and advocating for stricter background checks in workplaces. In doing so, we transformed our pain into purpose, ensuring that no one else suffered as we had. Claire may have tried to destroy us, but she underestimated one thing: our resilience. Through heartache and hardship, we rediscovered the strength of our bond. And those scars remain, they serve as reminders of how far we've come. Together, we built something stronger, a family rooted in honesty, forgiveness, and unwavering love. As the sun set on another day, casting golden light across our garden, I looked at Daniel and Ethan, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. Life hadn't been kind to us, but it had taught us invaluable lessons. We weren't perfect, nor did we pretend to be. But we were whole, united in our journey toward healing and growth. And somewhere out there, Claire might still be scheming, preying on unsuspecting victims. Yet, her power over us had diminished. Because in the end, it wasn't her actions that defined us, it was ours. Our pursuit of justice wasn't just about punishing Claire, it was about reclaiming our lives. With evidence in hand and determination guiding us, we took her to court. What followed was a battle that tested our resolve but ultimately vindicated our struggle. Armed with the private investigator's findings and corroborated testimonies from other victims who had come forward after hearing our story, we filed a lawsuit against Claire for fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation. It wasn't an easy decision. Legal battles are costly, emotionally draining, and uncertain, but we knew it was necessary. We couldn't let her walk away unscathed after the damage she'd inflicted. The trial began months later, drawing media attention due to the intricate nature of Claire's schemes. As witnesses, Daniel, Ethan, and I recounted our experiences on the stand, each of us recounting how Claire had manipulated us and others like us. Her lawyer attempted to cast doubt, portraying her as a victim of circumstance or painting us as overly suspicious individuals seeking retribution. But the mountain of evidence stacked against her proved insurmountable. One of the most powerful moments came when another victim, a woman named Sarah, testified about losing her life savings to Claire. Sarah broke down in tears, describing how Claire had ingratiated herself into her home, pretending to befriend her while systematically stealing everything she owned. That testimony struck a chord with the jury, humanizing the broader impact of Claire's crimes beyond just our family. When it came time for Claire to testify, she tried to spin her actions as mistakes born of desperation. "I needed money," she claimed, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt." But her demeanor under cross-examination unraveled quickly. Inconsistencies in her story, coupled with damning documents proving premeditation, left little room for sympathy. After weeks of deliberations, the day of reckoning arrived. The courtroom was packed, filled with reporters, supporters, and curious observers. As the judge entered, I held Daniel's hand tightly, feeling Ethan squeeze my shoulder from behind. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, a wave of relief washed over me. Claire was sentenced to several years in prison, ordered to pay restitution to her victims, and barred from holding certain types of employment in the future. Though the victory brought closure, it also underscored the fragility of trust and the importance of vigilance. Claire's punishment wasn't just about retribution, it was a reminder that people like her exist, thriving in the shadows unless exposed. By sharing our story publicly and pursuing legal action, we hope to prevent others from falling prey to similar scams. Justice doesn't erase pain, but it does provide peace. Knowing Claire would face consequences gave us the strength to fully embrace our new beginning. Together, we planted roots, not just in the soil of our garden, but in the foundation of our renewed family bond. In the aftermath of the trial, life slowly returned to normal, or rather, a new kind of normal. The debts were still being repaid, and scars remained, but they no longer defined us. Instead, they became reminders of our resilience, proof that even in the face of betrayal, we could rise stronger. On a sunny afternoon, shortly after the verdict, we gathered in our backyard to plant a tree, a symbol of growth, healing, and hope. As Daniel dug the hole and Ethan carefully placed the sapling inside, I watered it, watching the soil settle around its base. "This is for us," Daniel said softly, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "For everything we've been through and everything we'll become." Ethan grinned, wiping dirt off his hands. "And if anyone tries to mess with our tree, they'll have to deal with me." We laughed, the sound carrying through the air like a promise. Claire's shadow may have loomed large for a time, but it couldn't dim the light of our unity. Through heartache, perseverance, and love, we had reclaimed our story, and written a chapter far more meaningful than anything she could ever destroy. If you're sitting here today, feeling lost or overwhelmed by circumstances that feel insurmountable, I want you to know, you're not alone. Healing isn't linear, and it won't happen overnight. But it is possible. Start small. Prioritize open communication with those closest to you. Seek professional help if you need guidance. Therapists, counselors, and support groups can be lifelines during dark times. Most importantly, protect the emotional well-being of everyone involved, especially children. They deserve to see resilience modeled, even amidst chaos. Infidelity may shatter trust, but it doesn't have to define your future. You have the power to rebuild, forgive, or walk away with dignity, and all paths lead toward healing. That night, when my world seemed to crumble around me, I couldn't have imagined how far we'd come. Trust was broken, yes, but so much more emerged from the rubble: strength, understanding, and an unshakable bond between Ethan and me. Rebuilding wasn't easy, nor was it perfect. Some wounds will always linger, their edges raw even after years pass. But through vulnerability, patience, and sheer determination, we found our way forward. Ethan taught me something profound during this journey: hope exists even in the darkest moments. His ability to adapt, to find joy again despite everything, reminded me daily why fighting for our family mattered. And while Daniel's choices led us down a difficult path, they also forced us to confront truths we might otherwise have ignored. From pain came growth, from betrayal, clarity. If you're struggling right now, whether with infidelity, loss of trust, or simply navigating life's complexities, remember this: your story matters. Every tear shed, every step taken, every decision made shapes who you are becoming. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, but there is hope, for tomorrow, for healing, for brighter days ahead. Take it one moment at a time, lean on those who love you, and believe in yourself. Because no matter what happens, you deserve peace, respect, and happiness. Did this story leave you thinking about the strength of family bonds and the power of resilience? If you felt moved or inspired by this narrative, make sure to like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you never miss another powerful story like this one. Trust me, there's much more where this came from, and your support means everything in helping us create even better content for you. Hit that notification bell while you're at it, so you're always the first to know when we drop our next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.